In this video, we're going to look at the most ancient spiritual equine concept of all, the wind horse of Tibet and Mongolia. Stick around to the end, because I'm going to tell you how to access it for yourself. Welcome to Helios Equine Mythology, where we explore the spiritual, the symbolic, and the arcane in this horse culture that we hold so dear, and what it can bring, understanding these things, into our lives, personally and with our horses. The wind horse. This is perhaps the oldest known horse, mythological, iconic, spiritual motif or entity that's still currently around on the planet today. Because unlike many of the mythologies that we explore here that come from past cultures, the wind horse is alive and well and used as a concept in Mongolia and probably Kazakhstan, certainly Tibet, and other equine cultures that have been horse tribes since the dawn of horse culture at the beginning of the Bronze Age, 4,000 to 6,000 years ago. It's still there. And I have been lucky enough to be an incredible recipient of the wind horse. In fact, you could say that I owe my happiness to the wind horse. Some of you know my story, The Horse Boy, and its follow-up, The Long Ride Home, and those series of journeys that my autistic son and I did on horseback, first across Mongolia, from shaman to shaman, and later to other parts of the world on the advice of those Mongolian shamans to find healing. Not cure. You don't want to cure someone of autism. Autism is a wonderful thing. But healing, amelioration, happiness, joy. And this, of course, if you know our story, we found. I had been aware of the concept of the wind horse since I was a boy. First through books on Tibetan Buddhism in my aunt's house, which I'd pored over as a child because, of course, they had horse iconography, and I would look at anything to do with horses. So I think from the age of about 11, I was aware of this concept that the Tibetan Buddhists seem to have gotten from the Mongolian steppe cultures on the other side of the Altai Mountains. And I was aware that it had something to do with luck, with what you might call mojo, with your personal strength and power. Your wind horse is something personal to you. Your wind horse, everybody has one, is that motivating force within you that inspires you, that gives you courage, that gives you capacity, that gives you agency, that allows you to thrive, not just survive. It makes sense that a horse culture would come up with an idea like this. But the wind horse itself can be called upon as its own entity, if you like, a meta mojo, luck, motivator, agency giver for anyone who is feeling in need of general healing. The shamans of the horse cultures have used this idea of people's marrying up, I suppose, people's personal wind horse with the greater wind horse so that they can ride it like a winged horse to another realm, another dimension, where answers can be found, solutions, conflict resolution, healing. And guess what? it works. I know because I'm a recipient, and I shall tell you the story in a moment. The monks of Tibet who wandered over the Altai Plateau somewhere in the 17th century brought with them this idea, Buddhism. And they brought it to the Mongolian peoples, who at that time were probably the most violent nation on the surface of the world, of Earth. For centuries, perhaps millennia, once every 2 to 4 generations, they had exploded out of those steppes and sort of killed everybody from the Pacific to the Mediterranean until they ran out of steam, and then they would retreat back to the homelands before the next big explosion. We know these names: Genghis Khan, Kublai Khan, Tamerlane. We know of the Huns, who seem to have been the ancient ancestors of the Mongols, but effectively the same people. Attila, Charaton, Uldin, these names that struck terror into the ancient world and laid waste cities and thousands, probably millions of people. Acts of genocide. The human psychopath made superhuman through the power of the horse. And the arrow storm, the idea that you could have so many riders firing arrows that no army could stand against them. They would cook their meat as they rode by putting meat under their saddle, and the salt and the heat of their horse would cook so that they never had to get off. They lived in the saddle. They drank mare's milk. They drank the blood of horses so that they could have nourishment from them without killing them. They completely relied upon the horse, and they still do to this day. If you go to modern Mongolia, you will be welcomed into the ger, the yurt, the round tribal nomadic dwelling. The first thing you'll be given is a bowl of arag, which is fermented mare's milk. Tastes of vomit, by the way, but it has a kick. However, these monks that wandered over the plateau, the Altai Plateau, back in the 17th century, brought an idea of a more peaceful way of looking at the world. And what's so interesting is that almost in a generation, the Mongolian people, what's one of the greatest achievements, I think, of human history, the Mongolian people sort of pinched themselves and said, yeah, why do we need to behave this way? We don't need to do this. And in effectively a generation, stopped and became one of the most peaceful nations, and still to this day, on the planet. So, there was an exchange. The monks bring Buddhism and this peaceful outlook. The Mongolians give them the concept of the wind horse, and that goes back to Tibet, and you find it today in all the Tibetan Buddhist iconography. But like I said, this is not a dead concept. This is not a historical concept. This is not an old or even mythological, or at least a non-living mythological concept. It's still alive and well. When I was seeking out healing for my autistic son, Rowan, and I wasn't trying to cure him, as I said, I was trying to help him alleviate the suffering of being incontinent, of being so sensorily oversensitive that any negative sensory trigger would just undo him. I wanted him to be able to have friends, to find his place in the world, to reach out to the exterior world, because autism, auto, the Greek word for the self, autoism, locked within the self, the difficulty being the relationship with the exterior world. I wanted to free him from that cage without compromising the beauty of his autistic soul, because autism comes with so many gifts, including this very quiet ego, especially the classic autists. And to this day, I shall tell you how he is to this day in a moment. I had been lucky enough to live with hunting and gathering groups in the Kalahari region of southern Africa for some years as a human rights advocate. So I had been exposed already to this kind of traditional shamanic healing. And I had seen, as pretty much anybody who spends time down in those sorts of parts of the world, I had seen many things in healing ceremonies by then where you just have to say, I don't understand what I saw, but it happened. I mean, seeing sicknesses being pulled out of people. I mean, people being able to go from incredibly sick to walking the next day, this sort of thing. And this is nothing unusual. In fact, this used to be, very much a part of human culture. But it's unusual in our Western culture now. So it was natural when my son was diagnosed for me to think, okay, I would like to seek out some healing this way, but my son became verbal, remember, if you know my story, with me sharing the saddle on the back of a horse called Betsy. So it was very natural for me to think, okay, Africa's not a horse culture. Where is there, or at least not that part of Africa, where is there a culture that combines this type of healing with horses? Mongolia. So that's why we went there. When we went to Mongolia, we engaged with the shamans of the horse tribes of the steppe. And the concept of the wind horse was brought in. The way you ride the wind horse and call in the wind horse is with the shaman's drum. And it's that same round drum that you see in the Siberian cultures, in Native America, in many of the Celtic cultures, the Buran, played around like this, and this of course sounds like what? It sounds like the hooves of the galloping horse. And first the shaman would ride the wind horse to the ancestors to look for answers. And then those answers were relayed to us, things we had to do, small rituals we had to observe over a course of some weeks. And these stories are told in the book, The Horse Boy. Eventually, we rode up into the land of the reindeer people. And the reindeer was the first animal to be domesticated for riding after the Ice Age retreated. And the reindeer people of Mongolia have contact with the horse tribes of the steppe, because the mountains and forests come to the steppe in northern Mongolia. And I would posit that the idea of the wind horse transferred from the reindeer people and riding the spirits there to the later cultures that then domesticated the horse. Because the reindeer people use a very similar concept, where the reindeer flies into the air. You know Santa Claus? We have these inherited mythologies down through the ages. So the idea of the reindeer through the sky is not new. In any case, what happened when the shamans called in the wind horse, the luck, the mojo, for first so that they could ride into the world of the ancestors, but also so they could restore Rowan's wind horse, his own luck, his own mojo, his own strength, his own thriving mechanism. Well, after that first healing on the steppe, Rowan turned and made his first friend during the ritual. It was the son, Tomo, of our guide, Tulga. He had never played with another child before. Only parallel play, always ignoring them. He turned and said, Mongolian brother. And then Tomo came on that journey with us, with his son. It was two fathers and two sons riding across northern Mongolia from shaman to shaman. In a second ritual, the shaman called upon the wind horse at a place called Lake Shaga. And this is where, in Mongolian mythology, the horse came into the earth. And again, a great cognitive leap forward. And then when we rode up finally into Siberia, where vehicles cannot go, where only the horse can take you in, the shaman of the reindeer people, Ghost, worked on my son for 3 days through the wind horse. And 24 hours later, my son did his first intentional poo and cleaned himself. For an autism parent, this is like watching, in my case, England win the World Cup. It was radical, revolutionary, life-changing. Of course, it's told in The Horse Boy and the movie The Horse Boy. You actually see the documentary, this moment happen. So the wind horse is not something to think of as just some idea. It's a living mechanism. It's a technology. It's a spiritual technology that still exists today. So how can you call upon your wind horse? It's easy, through prayer. But if you happen to be a horse owner or to be in contact with horses, you can also ask the horse directly. This goes on in Mongolia to put your hand on your horse, put your heart in your hand, close your eyes, give gratitude to your horse. Because what does your horse do? It carries you. It supports you. It transforms you. It renders you superhuman. You become bigger, faster, stronger, more beautiful when you are on or with a horse. It lends you its power. So pray when you are with your horse for this power of the wind horse to activate for you. It doesn't have to be to heal a problem or to resolve a conflict, but it can be. It can also be for general thriving. It can be for your family. It can be for somebody that you love. But also the gratitude that you give to your horse, your physical horse. And by that I mean you don't have to own the horse, you just have to be with the horse, because nobody owns horses. We have stewardship of horses. Horses can be our family members, but we don't own them any more than we own the land. And let the power of the horse bring you to the wind horse and bring you to the healing and the dreams and the fulfillment of the dreams. For what are horses but the embodiment of dream? Now, many of us know the legend of Pegasus and the winged horse. The Greeks were not really a horse culture until they received horses from Persia and also through contact with the steppe tribes of southern Ukraine, where it borders the Black Sea. The Greeks had trading posts there, and they came into contact with tribes very similar to the Mongols there. And many of these riders and war leaders were actually women, what the Greeks called the Amazons. They were terrified of the Amazons because it threatened their worldview, their patriarchal worldview. And we're going to talk about the Amazons in a later video. However, even the Greeks took the idea, perhaps, of the wind horse and embodied it in Pegasus, who now sits in a constellation in the northern hemisphere. So it's come to us in our culture too, in the West. But you can access the wind horse directly. Your heart in your hand on the horse. Gratitude first, then pray. And my prayer for you is that the wind horse carries you to your dreams. If this video was in any way inspiring, informative, entertaining, please thumb it up, hit those like buttons, because it does tell the algorithm to put out more of this content. If you would like to help us create more of this content, create the time to create more of this content, please, you'll see there's a thank you button down below. Send us a couple of bucks. It really massively helps. If you would like to learn how to train horses in the classical style of the old masters in a way that brings you and your horse joy, you'll see a link down below to our Helios Harmony course, free intro course, click on that. If you would like to come and be in this wonderful place with us and work with us and our horses in person, you can do that. Go to our website, longridehome.com, send us an email and we can make a plan. All right, my friends, till the next time.